Hi, how's it going? This is Resin of Collinwood for YouTube. Back to do a read-along review for Benight and Beguile, written by John Philip Betancourt. Book 3, Chapter 8, A Bloody Stake in the Game. The evening shadows created a menacing atmosphere inside the small jailhouse in downtown Welshport. As Rebecca Lockwood Lord sat on the hard wooden bench inside her cell, her stoic and even regal posture with her hands clasped in her lap chilled Philip Braga, who was sitting at a desk nearby. Philippe Philip, who had been hired as a part-time deputy alongside Constable Rains, wrote out the charges that Rains would be filing later in the morning in court. Ma'am, Philip said, walking over to Rebecca's call as the gloomy new electrical bulbs buzzed in the jailhouse. "Do you need anything?" he asked. Rebecca smiled politely and shook her head. No, no. I have to say, Philip, it is very good to see how well you're doing in life after leaving our house. This must feel very good, Rebecca said, reminding Philip he used to work as Jacob's page as a teenager before an accident in a car that left Philip's hand mangled. Philip looked down at the hand damaged from the accident where Jacob was drunk driving, rubbed it as the horrible memory floated into his mind of that drunken night. Job has been something to keep in my mind at work, he replied softly. At Celeste, she must be so proud of you. Jacob's been keeping her busy. I mean, Charlotte has been keeping her busy up at the mansion, Rebecca added, giving Philip pause. Has she now? Philip said, wondering in his mind why Rebecca would have mixed up Jacob and Charlotte's names. Indeed, you should go there and see what I see every day. You might be surprised by how well they're all getting along like a family, really. Rebecca added, trying to get rid of Philip by planting a seed of doubt in his mind about Celeste and Jacob's somewhat working relationship. She wanted to make him leave. She wanted to be alone. She wanted to get herself out of the cell with no one's eyes on her. Philip at stood there at the bars of her cell. He was confused by Rebecca's words. He was concerned too. But just before he could talk more, Constable Raids walked in. "That's enough from you," he said to Rebecca. Philippe snapped out of his concentrated mind, sat and walked back to his desk and handed Rains the paperwork on Rebecca. "All set for tomorrow at court," Philip said. "All right. Have a good night," Rains replied, releasing Philip of his duty. Philip smiled and headed for the door, and as he did, he turned back and saw Rebecca staring straight at him from her perch on the bench in her cell, sitting straight up. No slouching, no movement. She lifted a brow at him. He swallowed hard, almost fearing her. Then he headed for Terramore to see what exactly Rebecca was talking about regarding Jacob and Celeste's now close relationship. Well, what was all that about? Sowing seeds of doubt in the young man? Rains asked, seeing straight through Rebecca's mind games. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she replied. She noticed Rains putting down his things on his desk. "Shall we go over again what happened the night Jacob and Christian were shot?" he asked her. "I won't go over that again because you already know. Charlotte and myself were in the chapel at Terramore praying that evening. I had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with this crime," Rebecca asserted. "Then why did Jacob point to you as the culprit?" "Your own son?" Rains asked. "He is mistaken. Very, very mistaken," Rebecca answered as she got up from her bench like a queen getting up from her royal throne and came over to the bars. She gripped the bars and the chimed with the clicking of her golden ring. She smiled at him. Constable, you know this is all a mistake. How do I know that? He asked. Because I am not a killer. I am not an attempt to kill her. I am old enough to be your mother, and you know that your mother couldn't do something like this. How could I? She pointed out. If you let me go, I can financially make it worth your while. No one need know, she said. Ma'am, you're now attempting to bribe an officer of the law. That's a crime, too, he pointed out. I am attempting to compensate you for finding the real person who she paused mind sentencing when she read the spine of one of the books Gregory carried into the jail, The Capture of the Brides of Evil. Then, like floodgates opening, she noticed other items around his desk she recognized from her decades of studying the supernatural, the sinister, the shadowy side of humanity. These items and tools were for hunting: a crucifix hidden near some books, a Bible leather bound with a red ribbon. Then the floodgates opened. She noticed other items around his desk that she recognized from her decades of studying the supernatural, the sinister, the shadow side of humanity. These items and tools were for hunting: a crucifix hidden near some books, a Bible leather bound with a red ribbon, book marking down the middle, a bottle of something dark, a liquid, or some kind of elixir, perhaps to vanquish a spirit, a ghost, a demon. No, Rebecca remembered. The dark liquid in the container was holy water, mixed with the blood of a long dead saint. These were all silly items, things of Gothic intrigue and seances, but to Rebecca she believed, and it was clear Gregory Raines believed too, especially so by the most glaring of items of all, a sparkling rosary for protection over his body. It became clear to her now, like the sun peeking out from behind the dark rain cloud, what Rain's job is, what his true passion was all about. Rains in Welshport hunting witches. She couldn't believe her luck. She was sitting in a jail cell for a crime she didn't commit, and had to she had tried to get Eliza Good charged with, and now, in this very jail cell, she recognized the man keeping her there was a secret witch hunter. Ah, she said in a whisper, we are cut from the same stone, she added. He chuckled at her silliness. How so? I can help you find what you are looking for, she said, to his confusion. I'm looking for the truth, he replied. No, Rains, you're looking for someone who has sold their souls for powers. I know something about that. I know a lot about that, actually. I've been searching for those people myself, albeit not in the same way you have. I can give you a name that will finally show you the truth that you're searching for, Rebecca said cryptically. I don't know what you mean, he said, lying. Witches, Rebecca said, moving closer to Rains from behind the bars as best she could. I can give you a name of one. I can. I know where this witch lives, and you can have her. You have her name and do what you want with her. In fact, you'd be doing me a favor, too. You know nothing. Do not begin to trick me, Rain said. I've been and know more than you realize. I've seen and know more than you realize. Gerger began to think back about his time in Boston before he was transferred to Welshport. Years and years of his life were dedicated to finding those daughters of darkness that had terrorized his town. Family for generations from Salem, his ancestors' original home, his father and his father before him and his father before him were men who hunted these creatures who were so feared in the village of early Massachusetts, and their livestock and crops had all been damaged and killed off. The Rains family had been ruined by what they believed were curses from a witch. Rains had followed one here, one witch who had come from a family of witches. He sought her, he wanted her gone, and in between doing his job as constable, he was also secretly walking the streets in search of the last witch of this coven. It was his life's work, and now Rebecca knew the answer to his question: where was Eliza Good? Release me, and you'll find the one woman who I know in a fact is a witch. I know because she too came my life decades ago and caused me bodily harm. She promised me things and only gave me devastation. She's done things to my family, Rains, that you can only imagine in your worst nightmares. I want her gone just as much as you might. I promise you. She is the real criminal here. She and she alone. I will give you her name and where she lives, and you can have her, but release me. I am innocent, Rebecca said, dangling the carrot in front of the rabbit. What do I get in return if you're not telling the truth? He asked, considering her proposition. There is no need of that talk, because I am promising you truth now. I believe she is the one who shot Jacob, because she's the creature that has taken so much from my own life, my ability to have children, my grandsons. Rebecca paused before revealing the truth about Sebastian to Rains. Sebastian. What did this witch do to Sebastian? Rains asked, trying to have Rebecca finish her thought. Rebecca only wanted Rains to hunt the witch. She could not risk her own grandson being next on his list of capture. She saw the risk of telling about Eliza, but saw an even larger risk of giving Rains information on what Eliza did to Sebastian that needed to remain a secret. Rebecca was a lot of things, but she was not someone who betrayed her family's secrets, not like Jacob. She smiled and turned away from Rains and clasped her hands together, her arms forming a structured V formation, a sign of holding back information. I believe she is behind the kidnapping and ransom of Sebastian, and also the creation of his look-alike, impostor. Only a witch could create something like that, so convincing, Rebecca said, lying and keeping to the family's fake story of Sebastian's miraculous return. As Rebecca continued to explain her thoughts on the witch in their midst, with her back turned away from the bars, she heard Rain's keys jingle and the lock of the jail released. The bars then swung open. Rebecca turned towards the open cell and smiled. Give me the name of the witch, Rains demanded. Rebecca smiled, pleased with her work, and walked over just before the threshold of the jail cell. She was prepared now to finally get her revenge on Eliza for all she did. Eliza Good. Eliza Good is the witch. Find her on her own little island in her own little cabin and bring her to justice for us all, Rebecca said sinisterly. The name, that name, it rang in Gregory Rains' mind like a death knell from a church bell tower. It was her. It was the one he had been searching for, the last witch of the covenant from Salem that had destroyed his family. You know her? He asked eagerly. She's been here the whole time, he added, almost salivating. She's all yours, Rebecca cloyed. Gregory knew Eliza had been in the upper East Coast. He knew it all along, but had such trouble locating her. Eliza's perfect hiding place that she was unable to leave her own island. She was a prisoner of her own doing, and that is no way had ever really been her anywhere else. No one from her past ever attempted to find no such a remote island like Good Island. Rain stepped aside, allowing Rebecca to exit the sail. She walked slowly, stoically, and certainly happy with her work. She turned back and saw Rains getting things together to get out and find the witch. The shine of a sharp silver knife to kill, Eliza reflected in Rebecca's eyes as Rance slid it into the leather shelf carved with scenes of witches being burned at the stake. Oh, and tell dear Eliza I said goodbye, Rebecca said as she exited the jailhouse happy with what she had done. Gregory nodded his head that he would and reached down on his desk, opened the capture of the Brides of Evil. She turned to a marked page on what to do next. He was set to make sure this witch was taken care of once and for all. Gather your protections, pray for your safety, do not listen to their voices, sinning or speaking. Gather the villages, storm their lair, trap, burn with fire, kill. Gregory closed the book, took his Bible, and left the jail house, set for the Siren's Call pub, where he'd gather townspeople to go with him to Good Island on his night. A witch would finally find her justice at the hands of Constable Gregory Rance and the prop people of Welshport Island, as Rebecca made her home with Hampstead, who was patiently waiting for her outside the jailhouse, as any loyal personal butler would. She warned him to bring her into the mansion under the secret passage entrance at the back mansion. There she'd slither her way into the mansion via the passages inside the body of the house, veiled in secrets. She did not want anyone to know she had been released, especially Jacob. Not yet. She wanted to rest, breathe, and wait for the moment to show herself to her family, a free woman, and let Eliza's fate take shape all in its own way, now that it was in the hands of witch hunter Gregory Rains. Across the island and deep in the western woods of the Terramore Forest, Matthew and Nicholas followed Alice to Lockwood Thicket, where they would finally end the terror Alice feared would bring the end of all their lives. She wanted the vampire, the creature of the night, Sebastian Lord, gone from the earth once and for all. Through the thick wooded area, as the fog seeped around trees and bushes like rivers of the white smoke, the threesome quietly made their way in the darkness. Alice, her telepathic, one of her most powerful abilities, did not need a compass of any kind of honing device. She knew Lockwood Thicket was Sebastian's hideout, away from Terramore House. She had been there before. She had seen him there. She had even fought him there before. For his part, Nicholas was a trembling mess. He did not fear Sebastian outright, although there was some of that in the shaking of his hands, but he feared how his beloved sister would feel when and if she discovered he was involved in the killing of her husband. He wanted Evie above all else to be safe and away from the monster that Alice said was part of a larger, more robust curse that forced and created all of the dangerous evils that occurred on the island. Were it not for Alice and Matthew's Dionysian ancestries cursing settlers of Welshport, there would be no insanity of Albert Lord. There would be no witch of Good Island like Eliza. There would be no murder of Sabrina Spencer, and there would be no vampire Sebastian. Killing Sebastian, so said Alice, was the only way to begin to repair of all the terror brought onto them, and this would break Evie's heart knowing Nick was involved, regardless of the good intentions. Slowly the three made their way in the dark forest, and through the fog. Alice led the way. They could hear the trees swaying in the light night breeze and the waves crashing on the nearby shoreline. Crash after crash of the sea broke the silence of the forest and the wind. Then Alice stopped in her tracks. They were close to Lockwood, but she could feel something watching them. "What is it?" Matthew asked in a whisper behind her. "Listen," she replied. Nick looked round. He couldn't hear what she heard. Matthew began to breathe heavily. He heard what his sister heard. He felt what his sister felt. His own powers, long appeared, oppressed and pushed to the back of his mind, from time to time broke free when he felt stressed and worried. "Wolves," Matthew said to group in a hushed tone. "They're smelling us. They work for the monster," Alice replied, disappointed in the animal's choice of loyalty to Sebastian. "They're circling us," Matthew added. Frightened, Nick stepped closer to Matthew, who smiled at him and patted him on the shoulder. "Don't worry, they won't hurt us." "How do you know?" Nick added. "They're only here to scout for Sebastian," Alice replied, holding Nick's hand, then searching for her brothers. She closed her eyes, took in a deep breath, and let out a howl that matched any howl any wolf could breathe on a night of a full moon. The wolves ran off and hid in the shadows, allowing for the tree to finally make, for the three to make it to Lockwood Thicket without being detected by Sebastian. In the cabin, Sebastian stared, awaited his guest, although he was not alerted by his scouting wolf pack. He himself could sense the tension coming his way. There would be no ambush, not on him. He got up from the dark red velvet chair that was in front of a roaring fire, and lifted his arms above his head. The cloak he was the cloak he was wearing surrounded his body that began to float in the middle of the front room of Lockwood Thicket. He closed the cloak round him, creating a sort of dark cocoon of fabric that in seconds vanished in thin air. The room was empty now, just as the three slowly pushed open the door and found only a roaring fire, a half-full wine-glass filled with the blood of a hare from the woods. The three looked around. The four rooms of the thicket empty. Nick felt nervous. He sensed danger. Alice, too. "He's not here. We should go," Nick said. "Shh," Alice replied. She could sense the wolves outside still. They would not leave their master. Then, in a sudden lunge, reappearing out of nowhere, the vampire attacked Alice, knocking her to the floor. Nicholas screamed from fright and fell backwards onto a coffee table. Breaking it into pieces, Matthew too fell backwards and hit his head on the hard floor, knocking him unconscious. Alice and Sebastian began to struggle for power over each other. Sebastian over her, hissing with his mouth gaping open in an attempt to bite her fresh neck. Alice put her hands on his head and tried to push him back. She screamed and kept pushing, and his teeth were growling, growing longer and longer, so long that he was able to turn his head slightly to the right, pricking her on the wrist. Matthew scrambled to his feet, dizzy, disoriented. Sebastian laughed at Alice's pain and sinisterly licked the blood dripping down her exposed tan skin arm. She released her hand from his forehead and punched him in the face, knocking him over. "You're here to kill me, but the death toll will not be one. Not tonight," Sebastian hissed. Alice stood up, her clothes somewhat torn, and she stood strong. Sebastian, too, stood up, his breathing heavy, his heart pounding, his belly hungry for her blood. I killed you once. I can kill you again, she growled as he laughed at her reference of the events 2 days before. Did you? Sebastian asked sarcastically. You tried to drown someone who is immortal, you imbecile. I promise you only one thing, lots and lots of pain, Sebastian said as he then turned and rushed Alice in such speed she did not see him coming. He bit her in the midsection, knocking back down to the ground. She began to shake in his grip, shake violently. He opened his mouth and went down to bite in the throat, and he came to break her skin. She screamed such a scream that it shook the entire thicket like an earthquake. An old unlit chandelier fell. Picture frames and candles were knocked over. Sebastian jumped off of Alice, covering his ears from Alice's banshee-like call. Then Nick got up. Sebastian turned to him and lunged at his brother-in-law, grabbing him from behind and pushing his head over. Nick's jugular vein exposed. Stop! Alice screamed. Then Nick lifted his arm while Sebastian was distracted and leveled an elbow to his eye. Sebastian became furious, his anger boiling in his body, and he began to tap into the fury of all the dark shadows that surrounded and tempted him in his sleep. The good side of him had slowly become eclipsed with all the attempts on his life, and now he was becoming a full-on creature of the night. Sebastian, in his alter ego giant vampire formation, jumped into the air, floating, flying, his arms stretched to 4 times their length, and grabbed at Nicholas, gripping him in his arms and squeezed him tightly, locked him in place. Nicholas screamed. Alice opened her mouth again to scream, her banshee-like yell, but Sebastian's giant arms swung over, knocking her over and unconscious just like Matthew was. Sebastian, now fully elevated into the dark, most evil mindset, was now set to kill Nicholas. The vampire felt threatened, attacked, and was protecting his own lair filled with 3 intruders. The monster he had become was not the same man Nick's sister loved. He was something else, something demonic and evil and bloodthirsty. This transformation of Sebastian floating in the air, mouth filled with what seemed like thousands of sharp fangs, dragged Nick closer and closer to him, with his arms now shortening to a normal length. Nick, Nick tried to release himself, but he was trapped. Let him go! A scream came from the front door. It was Evie Jordan Lord, Nick's sister and Sebastian's beloved wife. She had come to stay the night with her husband, and was shocked to find him in his monstrous form attempting to kill her own brother. Evie, Sebastian said in a quiet, more normal voice. Let Nicholas go. Let him go now, she yelled. Sebastian began to reform into his normal vampire state, almost human, his eyes still gray, his skin still cold, but he was now back to his face Evie recognized, but he still had Nicholas trapped in his grip. I won't let him hurt me. This is what they wanted to kill me. Don't you see? They wanted to kill me, Sebastian told his wife. Sebastian, you have to stop this. Look around you. You're hurting people left and right, and it cannot continue, Evie said, for begging for her brother's life. You cannot hurt him. Let him go. Matthew came to and slumped over to his sister Alice and shook her to wake her. No, I cannot let them win and try and destroy me again. I have to do this, Evie. I have to save myself so that we can be together. I'm sorry, Sebastian said, opened his mouth, pushing the weak Nicholas' head over, ready to bite down and kill him. Evie screamed and grabbed a broken piece of the coffee table. Nick broken in the fall. She lunged at Sebastian with the sharp broke off table, leg in her hand. Sebastian saw his wife coming at him with the sharp object and tossed Nick to the floor. Evie jumped on Sebastian and the two fell to the ground. Evie was on top of, and she drove the stake into her own husband's chest. Blood poured from his body. He yelled. The wolves outside howled. The wind blew over the thicket like a hurricane. The wolves scratched at the door and at the walls. Sebastian then returned to his human form like he looked before Eliza turned him into this monster. His eyes, good and kind, amber toned, he looked into Evie's blue eyes, her hair falling down over her face like a cascade of wistry vines of brown and gold. He touched her face and felt her heartbeat, then another heartbeat. He felt two heartbeats. Even the small child she was carrying in her stomach, his child, a baby, he said in a whisper as blood came to his lips. Evie cried and held down the stake in his chest, saving her brother. Then she turned the stake driven in the deeper to his chest, ending it. And Sebastian vanished into a pile of ash. Are you okay? Nicholas asked, rushing over to his sister, who was devastated in tears on the pile of her husband's as the suddenly vanished into nothing. You saved me, he said, hugging her. I love you, Nicky, I love you, she said, hugging him back. You saved us all, Alice said as Matthew helped her up. You've done something incredible, Evie. You saved us all. The world even, Matthew said as Evie cried in her brother's arms. A widow once more. Dawn approached. The sun cracked in the dark sky, filling it with an orange and purple glow. The seagulls swarmed to the shore, following the early morning fishing fleets leaving Welshport dock, headed out to the open blue sea for the morning's catch. In her bed, slowly walking to the bright morning light, was Charlotte Lord. She had locked her mind off for 3 days. Nothing from Sabrina, the spirit of her aunt that swirled in her. Sabrina was silent, angry in her silence, but silent nonetheless. Charlotte yawned in her bed with white sheets, her perfect white nightgowns, and her perfect long blonde hair a smear of blood. Charlotte then saw blood on her hand. She began to panic. Where was it coming from? Where was the blood coming from? She quickly jumped over of her white bed and rushed to a long, oval, sharp mirror on a stand that was tilted towards the window, reflecting the sunlight back toward the outdoors. Charlotte yawned. The mirror yanked the mirror on one side so it flipped over onto its hind so that it now faced her 10-year-old face. A huge dark blood in the center of her chest. She searched her body. There was no wound, nothing, no cuts, nothing. Charlotte closed her eyes and opened her mind, allowing Sabrina to awaken. A jolt of energy vibrated within the young woman's body. Sabrina was furious. How could you, Charlotte? We were supposed to work together, and I together, Sabrina's ghost said, appearing in the mirror to Charlotte. Look, look, Charlotte said, ignoring Sabrina's anger. Sabrina gasped at the sight blood, but from the way the blood had stained the nightgown, she could still tell there was no wound, that Charlotte was safe and unharmed, yet the blood came from somewhere. And suddenly, in the reflection, Sabrina too started to see a blood stain in her own white dress, but this time there was no wound in the center of her body. The wound was not painful, it was just something in the center of her, showing her where something had happened to Sebastian. Something has happened to him, Sabrina said. Who? Charlotte asked, changing into clean clothes. My son, Sabrina said, her voice saddened by the feeling of loss coming into her ghostly mind. He's different, not the same. Something I don't understand, Sabrina said, her mind racing as all the information from the past days when Charlotte closed her off came flooding into her ghostly mind. Is this his blood? Charlotte asked now in a fresh dress. I think he's gone. Sebastian is gone, Sabrina said. Charlotte, listen to me. Come here, listen to me. Sabrina shouted from the mirror. Charlotte came over and sat on the floor and started into the mirror at her aunt. Our family is on the brink, my darling. Something is afoot, and I cannot understand it. I feel as though Sebastian is gone, but I don't truly understand how. He cannot be because he is like me, something that cannot be vanquished so easily. What do we do? What should I do? Charlotte asked. I have to think. I have to process. This is why you should never, ever take me away like you did for so long. There isn't enough time for me to plan. I cannot contemplate all of this all at once, Sabrina said, sounding somewhat stressed, with all the information streaming from Charlotte's mind into her like a wild stream, gushing thousands of gallons of water into the sea. I can ask Evie to bring him to us tonight. Would that help? Charlotte asked. No, maybe I don't know, Charlotte. I can't think. Something has happened. I feel it with my sister as well. Eliza is in danger. My God, child, the world has gone to hell in the days that you blocked me in your mind. We have to rest. I have to rest, the spirit said. Then Celeste came into the room. She had come to get Charlotte up for the day. Seeing Sabrina, the ghostly dead woman in the mirror, startled her. You shouldn't be here, Celeste said sternly. There are things happening out of your control, Celeste. I need to take charge and make them right. It's been too many days. I need to take charge, Sabrina said. Be nice to Celeste. She's having my baby brother or sister, Charlotte said sweetly, going over and hugging Celeste. Sabrina turned her ghostly head to the governess. Her face showed disdain and anger. You're keeping the child, Sabrina said, knowing that Celeste was giving herbs to help end the pregnancy. Sorry. This is none of your concern. The child will be safe. I promised myself this, and I have no worries that Jacob will harm it, Celeste confirmed. And what about you? Do you feel safe having Jacob's child? Sabrina wondered. I don't fear him anymore, Celeste added. Foolish girl, everything has become out of hand. Everything, Sabrina said angrily. You are too far now, too far along now. You must always make sure, whatever happens, that Jacob does not corrupt that child. Think of Charlotte. Think of what he did to Mary. Think of what he could and would do to you if he feels you will cross him. You must, absolutely must, stay on top of Jacob. His treachery knows no bounds, Sabrina warned, knowing full well how Jacob worked after being one of his first victims. Sabrina, you should think about finding your way out of this never-ending cycle you live in. There's no way out for you, and the rest of us here on this side have to deal with things ourselves. Please think about that. Think of what you are doing to poor Charlotte while you live in her. She has to be free of you in the way we all do. There is truly nothing you can do from where you are that will help us no more, Celeste said. Sabrina went silent and after a few seconds vanished from Charlotte's mirror and back into her mind. Charlotte, darling, get dressed for the day, okay? I'll come back to the and a moment to brush her hair. Celeste said, leaving Charlotte to her own devices. Think about closing her off again, maybe forever, she added. Charlotte frowned. She loved her Aunt Sabrina, but at the same time she worried about her presence in this their world was creating more friction that than helping. It was hard for the young girl to manage everything that was coming at her. The world, as it seemed, was spinning out of control. Then Sabrina appeared again in the mirror when Celeste left. Charlotte, listen to me. Listen to me, my sweet girl. Under no circumstances should Celeste have that child. It'll ruin us all, Sabrina's ghostly voice said. What? Why? Charlotte replied, heartbroken and understanding. Because this birth will only empower your father further. I want you to do something, and I want you to do it soon. I can help you, but you have to promise me you will do it, Sabrina asked. What? The young girl asked. Sabrina came out of the mirror in the fog of blue light. She swirled in the air and came up to Charlotte's diamond studded ear and whispered her secret plan. She devised was so heinous Charlotte burst into tears immediately and screamed she would not help her. I won't, I won't, I won't, the young girl said. And if you do this, Auntie, I will shut you off. I will do it, and do it forever, Charlotte threatened. Sabrina then knew. What if she too wanted to get her revenge on Jacob and find out what was happening with her son Sebastian? She would have to take care of Celeste with the baby herself. No more little girl games. Alright, that is the Read the Dune. Uh, shocked. Shocked. Sebastian got staked. I don't think it's over for him. I could be wrong. I'll say this too because we didn't. The hunter is supposed to be um, Eliza now, or Eliza's spirit, but the hunter has sort of taken its own form in a sense, has taken its own, by my understanding, its own persona. So my thing of it is that the hunter is gonna do something. I don't know what, because the hunter's still out there. That's what Eliza. When Eliza saw the flies on the wall, that was the hunter warning her. So I get the sense the hunter's gonna do something. I don't know what. Again, I'm making a bold prediction. I could be wrong. Put in the disclaimer here. um, yeah, the ghost plot is plotting death. That's creepy, and scary too. Really, really good. Shocking, shocking chapter. I think that's that's a part of a good storyteller. Somebody who always keeps you guessing, and John does a really good job here. You know, I was not expecting Sebastian to get staked. It's just, I mean, I know they had been fighting, but I was not expecting that at all. But we'll see what happens next on chapter 9. I'll do my read along for that on, I want to say Tuesday. So, happy guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a good one.